the cure.
Look at me, G. We can help you. We can fix it. We can make it like it was. Stay with me, please.
Hello everybody, I'm Romijn Thompson.
And I'm Cameron Simpson.
And welcome back to my channel, and today is my birthday, so yeah.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, man. And since I'm continuing on with my New Year's resolution special, we have now reached X-Men The Last Stand, which was directed by Brett Ratner, and not Bryan Singer, who directed the first two films as he was busy directing Superman Returns. And which is a very controversial move, really, because a lot of people back then were so passionate about the first two X-Men films, and myself included, and directing Superman Returns. I mean, I thought at the time it was fine and acceptable as a Superman film, but choosing not to direct the third X-Men movie, I don't know if that was like the right choice. But at the time, when it came to The Last Stand, however, I thought for the most part that the film was entertaining, mostly because it had great action sequences. Still, it had the same characters that we all knew and love, and some new ones, which we'll get to later. But as I got older, I understand a large majority of X-Men fans are very divisive about this film, because when you talk about certain movies in the franchise that most people in general don't really like that much, you would mostly hear about either Dark Phoenix or this, or mostly X-Men Origins Wolverine. I always go back and forth. I mean, I would much watch something like this over Origins, but I would say I do have a soft spot for the Last Stand for the most part. I do have issues with it. I can obviously see like a lot of people are being why they would be so divisive about this, because you have an interesting storyline involving the mutant cure and the Dark Phoenix storyline, which was set up pretty well in X2, because it built up Jean Grey eventually becoming the Phoenix. And I thought that setup was set up perfectly by the end of X2, but its execution, however, I don't know, really. But for the most part, when it comes to the action, it's enjoyable to watch. My opinion has not changed on that since I was a kid. This was the first X-Men movie I actually saw in theaters when I was 8 years old back in 2006. And it's enjoyable for the action for the most part. Some of the acting for the most part, still pretty good, but it has some issues regarding its story. But that's about it, really. For the most part, it's mostly an okay X-Men movie, but that's just my opinion. So I don't hate this film as much as most X-Men fans do, but that's just my professional opinion, really.
For this particular film, Revan's right about one thing. For its time back in the day, I heard that there was a lot of controversy about it, because a lot of people were back and forth on the idea of a mutant cure and then Jean just turning into Phoenix. A lot of people could say maybe it wasn't executed well, but at the same time, I'm not an X-Men fan like most people out there, or like my friend here. I don't know it like you guys do. But I do know a good superhero film when I see one, and for the most part, I do kind of see some of the issues that people are talking about with this.
One of the biggest issues is its runtime, really, because you have like two interesting stories with the mutant cure and Jean being the Phoenix, yet it doesn't really get enough time for both of them to be fully developed. It kind of reminded me a bit of Spider-Man 3 when they add in like so many like storylines into one film, or The Amazing Spider-Man 2 with them like adding like with them having like so much crammed into that one film that would eventually ended up like setting up a Sinister Six movie, which of course didn't happen. But I rest my case, because that's kind of like how I felt, and I'm pretty sure like some people like feel about that, because like having like two different storylines, but it's not, they can't really, it's almost like the filmmakers couldn't really decide which would be the one they should really, like, focus on. I guess they're like, fuck it, we'll just add, like, the Cure storyline and add in the Jean Grey becoming Phoenix stuff, because both of those storylines in the comics are very popular. I would say, for the most part, the Dark Phoenix saga in particular is very well beloved by so many X-Men fans, really.
Guess I can kind of see some resemblance to Spider-Man 3, but I also would like to point out that it's different on a few occasions. When it comes to, like, Spider-Man 3, for example, the main reason that actually failed was because Sony insisted that Venom be a part of the project when he wasn't supposed to be there in the first place, so they had to quickly change things. When it comes to, like, the way it operates in this particular story, I admit it is, I suppose, a little confusing, but at the end of the day, a lot of times when it comes to criticism and the way things, like just the way things are viewed, mostly it's just a matter of opinion, like one person could think one way, one person could think the other. You have, like, basically two storylines, Jean becoming Phoenix and the mutant cure at the same time. Now, normally, I would agree that probably would be pushing it a little, but also consider this. At the same time, we're basically entering a war here that has been upcoming since basically the first movie, humans versus mutants, and there are two people on two different sides here, Charles and Magneto. One trying to create peace and harmony with mutants and the coexistence between the two races, and then Magneto, who believes that one is superior to the other and that they should just wipe them out.
Yeah.
When Jean starts to lose control of her powers, and
that's when shit gets haywire, especially in the third act, because that's one complaint that I kind of have, is that Jean doesn't really do anything until, like, the very end of the movie. I mean, she does things, but she loses her shit in the third act. But that's about all that we get from her, really. And that's a major issue that I have with that character. I mean, this is no fault of Famke Janssen, because I think that she's a fantastic actress. Pretty underrated in my opinion. I mean, given her legacy, both with this and one particular film that I really love, a James Bond film called GoldenEye, which has always been very close to my heart, by the way. However, I just think her potential was wasted, so to speak, in The Last Stand, really.
Well,
we get two intros, so to speak, in this movie, and, well, for the first one, anyway, I mean, there's a younger Charles and Eric, before their days as Professor X and Magneto, visiting Jean and trying to, like recruit her, to, like, becoming a student for Xavier's school. But when it comes to the second one, however, for the introduction of Angel, I remember that being disturbing, really, because that's quite a intro, and as, like, this becomes like a turning point for the story of for the Cure, for the Cure storyline for the film, because Angel is the son of the man who distributes the mutant cure, and I like a large chunk of, like, the story that involves the cure, honestly, because of course this is going to cause a lot of controversy, because some mutants want to jump at the chance of taking the cure to finally have a chance to finally fit in with society, while some sees this as a complete insult that they don't need the cure, and their gifts of mutation, for the most part, being treated as a disease. And to a degree, I can understand why most mutants would be heavily divided by this idea.
It keeps you guessing. It keeps you interested in where we're going to go from here.
Well, this is a very interesting idea for certain characters, especially Rogue. They can't touch anybody without essentially killing them, and she much would rather take the cure so she can finally, like, be able to, like, interact with people and touch people. And I like the scene with her and Logan later in the film when he's like, if you're gonna go, then go. Just do it for you, not for some boy. Just make sure it's what you want. Which, there's a deleted scene later which shows at the end of the film she doesn't take the cure and accepts her mutation, while in the theatrical cut she takes the cure just so she can be with Bobby because it's what she would want. But I'm kind of split on that, to be honest, because in the first two films, she is horrified by her mutation because she can't really touch anybody without essentially killing them. And you would think that in this movie, I mean, of course, in the theatrical cut, she does take the cure, but in the deleted scene, she chooses not to. So I'm kind of glad that she went for the cure in the theatrical cut, but in the deleted scene, I'm just like, I don't know, girl. You were pretty terrified of your powers, so which one is it gonna be? I don't know. I do not know.
Yes, that scene can get a little confusing. While I would normally wonder why something like that is there, my best theory to me is that this kind of just supports what I've been saying, I think, from the beginning of this review. The fact that this movie necessarily, while maybe for its time was very controversial, at the same time, it's not necessarily bad because it's just a matter of like one's interpretation. Which way do you want to go? What do you want to do? Like, if you had the chance to change your life for the better or worse, but keyword also being permanently, what would you do? Which way would you want to go? And if you made that decision, would you be happy with it? Would you regret it? Or would it be everything you ever wanted?
Who knows?
One of the best casting choices I can think of in the X-Men world, and that's even like before I really started to get into this thing, as I'm sure most fans did, is the idea to basically bring Beast into the equation as part of the X-Men as he did in the comics, and played none other than Kelsey Grammer for both this and the Days of Future Past movie, playing the future version of Beast. I really think this guy like does an awesome job as the character, and when he's just on the screen, like to a lot of people, sometimes myself included, he really just steals the show. He's charming, he's kind of like a pacifist, he's also just like this diplomat, crusader for mutant rights, but also when the time comes, he like deploys violence when necessary, because it's kind of like what they say in this quote, Winston Churchill says, there comes a time in every man's life where you get the point.
Yeah. Yeah. He is a total badass when the situation calls for it. And Kelsey Grammer just nailed everything perfectly with Beast. I mean, he's well-spoken, highly intelligent. He's such a badass. And I love every single second that this character is on screen. And the makeup work done on Kelsey Grammer as Beast, pitch perfect. And yet another kick-ass blue person. And I'm just like, what is it? And of course, there's Mystique in this movie, but no Nightcrawler, which is strange because I love Nightcrawler. Where they take Mystique in this movie is pretty interesting. She gets captured, but Magneto eventually tries to rescue her. Tries to break her out of like where she's being held captive. But I like that idea because, given that she helped him escape his plastic prison in X2, so they recruit like New Mutants like Multiple Man and Juggernaut. But when she sacrifices herself by taking the cure, before Magneto could, this scene where she just she's left behind by Magneto with him being like, I'm sorry, my dear, you're not one of us anymore. And I'm just like, damn, man, she was loyal to you from the start. And I'm just like, just tossing her aside like trash? Well, fuck you too.
Yeah, just not cool, big guy. Not cool.
Yeah, because you would think that he would like do something, like, be like but no, it just shows how far his prejudice goes against humans. But but it's a very effective scene, and I'm just like, yeah. And the other important aspect of the film is, of course, Jean Grey eventually becoming Phoenix. And before we even get to that part of the story, I mean, let's focus on Cyclops a little bit. I mean, obviously he's still very heartbroken over Jean's death, and I like this interaction between him and Wolverine, where Wolverine's like, maybe we should move on from Jean, and I like that line that he gives him, not everybody heals as fast as you, Logan. So he goes off to Alkali Lake, and he starts hearing Jean's voice in his head, and Jean is back. Jean is back, and they have a romantic moment, and this moment always, and since I was a kid, always pissed me off. And a lot of X-Men fans will agree with me on this. She fucking kills Cyclops off screen. And I'm just like, just an off-screen death for a beloved X-Men character? I mean, sure, he's not well utilized in the films, but it's fucking Cyclops. Just like, disintegrated off-screen. Just like, I mean, it's fucking Cyclops. You don't do that. And I get that it's supposed to create an emotional moment for the audience. And it's just, it's Cyclops. Yeah. You don't do that. Just, no. And they kill off another major character, and that's Charles. Patrick Stewart, I mean, his performance in this movie is great. I mean, it's Patrick Stewart, of course he's going to be great. But having, like, Jean, like, completely disintegrate him, I remember being heartbroken in 2006 when I saw that in theaters, and I was like, no. And what happens, like, later in the post-credit scene, I'll get to that later, but sure, I mean, it's a big emotional moment for both the audience and the characters, and for the most part, until the post-credit scene, this works pretty well. And for the story, it works. It affects, like, a large chunk of characters. And both the heroes and the bad guys, mostly Magneto in particular, are just a dead bit. But I was surprised they had the balls to really do that.
Yeah. I honestly, I couldn't believe it either. Because the odd thing is, you see, for me, I actually didn't start out in the X-Men franchise at the beginning or in Last Stand. I actually started in the Wolverine movie. So by then, Charles was already back somehow, and I didn't really know the full extent of what happened. But the first time I saw that scene, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, unbelievable. But at the same time, you know, I kind of get why, because throughout all this, they mentioned that when Charles first met Jean, he installed a series of psychiatric barriers inside her head to kind of prevent Phoenix from ever coming out again, so Jean would have control of her powers. But in doing so, he created a caged beast, so to speak, inside her head that wanted out, and by the time she got out, she didn't want back in.
Yeah, like Wolverine said, you know, when you cage the beast gets angry.
One of the biggest issues I think that I mainly have with this film that you could say is probably the fact that they don't really utilize to the full degree some of the characters in this film, but at the same time, you know, I think it's due to the runtime that they don't really get a chance to really do that, but it also gives them a chance to save them up, use them for later, for when they really get a chance to shine, and that to me just kind of makes up for it more or less down the line. But I guess it really is.
Yeah, because they introduce new characters. I mean, we already mentioned Beast, who is awesome, and they introduce new characters. They introduce Multiple Man. They introduce Juggernaut. They they have Colossus there, and Angel, I mean, he pops up here and there. I already mentioned that he got like a good introduction as the son of the man who introduced the mutant cure, and he comes close to actually getting the cure, but rejects it, and then he pops up later at Xavier's school, stays there for a bit, and then he shows up in the third act just to save his father, which I thought was kind of a satisfying ending for his character arc, but that's about as far as it goes, really. But for Mars chunk of the characters, most of them don't really have time to shine outside of the characters that already been established in the previous films, like Wolverine. And I like that they give Storm a little bit more to do, and she kind of like takes like a more leadership role. I mean, sure, she gotten like a few stuff to do in the previous films. I mean, she electrocuted Toad, and I've always loved that tornado scene in X2, and she gets to kick a bit of ass in X3, so she kind of like becomes like the co-leader right next to Wolverine of the X-Men, and there's a little bit of focus on Wolverine, but not too much like in the previous two films. And speaking of Wolverine, he has one of his most badass moments when it comes to his fight with Spike. And I've always loved that forest fight. It's just like, yes, it kind of like continues to like build up for like what's to come, but it will never top the forest scene in the film that we will get on very, very soon. So, but yes, I cannot deny the action in this film is entertaining. What can I say about the big third act? For the most part, it's pretty awesome. Yeah, I definitely can't deny that.
And you get like this big epic moment with Magneto where he literally uses his powers to lift the Golden Gate Bridge straight up into the air and right onto the facility holding the boy who's the source of the cure. And that to me is just epic.
Yeah, say what you can about this film. I mean, I pretty much guarantee almost nobody can deny that scene looks pretty much awesome. And of course, we get the big war that has been set up in the first two films with X-Men and the humans against Magneto and his Brotherhood. And for the most part, it's executed pretty well. I mean, Wolverine kicks ass, Beast kicks ass, Storm kicks ass, Colossus kicks ass, and Kitty Pryde has her moment with Juggernaut. And speaking of Juggernaut, he has his mean moment. I'm the Juggernaut, bitch! To me, he's kind of a bit of a joke, really. And I always like this moment with Wolverine and this one guy.
Grow those back.
One of the moments I personally enjoyed watching during this big fight on the island with them was this moment where Pyro finally joins the fight and Iceman has to take him out. And they have like this epic like power struggle between the two of them doing fire and ice respectively. And Pyro's all over him and he goes, "You're in over your head, Bobby. Maybe you should go back to school." And then Iceman just activates his full power and turns to ice and knocks him out, and he goes, "You never should have left." I just love that.
Yeah, that's a pretty good moment. And it's like, think of it as like a kid standing up to a bully, really. I'm just like, that's a good moment. I'm not going to lie, that is a good moment. I've always liked this moment when Colossus performs where Colossus and Wolverine try to perform the fastball on Magneto, and of course he stops him because Master of Magnetism and Wolverine adamantium coated in his entire skeleton. But this was meant as a distraction so Beast could give Magneto the cure, and all that's left is Jean, who's now Phoenix. And this is when she goes full berserk, like after like a bunch of troops try to shoot her with the cure. And of course, I mean, she goes full batshit and starts like wiping out like a large chunk of people with her body disintegrating powers. And of course leads to the big moment where Wolverine is eventually forced to kill her because he's the only one that can stop her, since because of his healing factor and his adamantium skeleton, he can resist Jean's body disintegrating powers. So yeah, she begs Logan to save her by killing her. In fact, this is the second time in the film that she actually begs Wolverine to kill her, and he has a moment where he tells Jean that he loves her, and Wolverine kills Jean. And it's a really heartbreaking moment, and this would continue to haunt Wolverine in The Wolverine, which we'll get to later, but it does create a very emotional moment for Wolverine, and you can't blame him for being so heartbroken to kill essentially the woman he loves.
When it comes to Jean's action moment, to me, it's definitely worth the wait, because you know what they say in both terms of chess as well as best movies: always save the best piece of it for last.
And they did, because like I mentioned before, Jean's Dark Phoenix stuff, it's mostly brushed to the side, really. While it was set up perfectly in the first two films, but given the runtime of the film, so I just want to add on to this. There's a lot of deleted scenes. Some of them are interesting, but there's some I can understand why they cut it. But yeah, I think it would have benefited the film if it was a bit longer, say 2.5 hours, or at least close to 3 hours. And I think it would have benefited the film to have half of the film focus on the Cure stuff and deal with Jean Grey becoming Phoenix. And I would say one of my biggest issues with her is that there's not really an emotional conflict with Jean and her Phoenix self. I would say it would have been interesting to see Jean dealing with this really big psychological change, being taken over by this powerful force that could essentially destroy the world. But they don't really go into there, but they just mostly brush it aside until the third act. But they just had Jean had a moment, but that was about it, really. And when it comes to the ending of I would guess for the most part they achieved some peaceful coexistence between humans and mutants because of Beast. But for the most part, when it comes to the overall Cure storyline, Rogue gets the cure so she can continue her relationship with Iceman. And speaking of Iceman, there's another love triangle. As if the one between Wolverine, Jean, and Cyclops wasn't enough, there's one between Iceman, Rogue, and Kitty Pryde, played by Ellen Page, before she became Elliot Page, which that's a completely different subject, but onto what I thought about this. I think the love triangle between Iceman, Kitty Pryde, and Rogue was for the most part completely unnecessary. Iceman's dating Rogue, but all of a sudden he's getting friendly with Kitty. I'm just dude, yeah. And of course I already mentioned that Rogue takes the cure so she can be with Bobby. But I thought the whole love triangle was completely unnecessary, and the cure for the most part is proven to be completely pointless, because Magneto eventually is beginning to regain his powers. And in regards to the death of Charles Xavier, which for the most part was handled alright, they explain later that he transferred his consciousness into the body of his twin brother. And I'm what the fuck just happened? And this is like one of my biggest issues with the movie. And eventually they show later in The Wolverine that Patrick Stewart is back as Professor X. And it's almost like for a large chunk of The Last Stand was like completely ignored because a large chunk of like fans don't really like The Last Stand all that much. But I don't hate The Last Stand as much as most X-Men fans do. But when it comes to that moment with Xavier's death, for the most part, proven to be almost completely pointless because it was fine. He died perfectly. But, I mean, if you're going to kill him, kill him. But just don't have his consciousness being some twin brother. And it's just like, it's almost like they just completely just threw away whatever the fuck happened. I don't know. But, yeah, I'm just like, it's confusing, but it's just okay. I mean, that was my reaction after first watching it. After years of not watching it, and I'm just like, I don't know. Overall, it has its problems. It's entertaining, I won't lie about that, but it's mostly a bit of a missed opportunity. I don't hate this film. I would say that Last Stand is, for the most part, okay. And it's an acceptable comic book movie to watch. It's definitely an oddball in the franchise. It has its moments. It's entertaining. But that's about as far as it goes, really. And I would much rather watch this over something like Origins. But that's just me. So I'm going to give X-Men The Last Stand a B-. So what did you think of The Last Stand? Let me know in the comments below. And I want to give a big thank you to Cameron for joining me on this review.
Of course.
This was definitely a lot of fun. Definitely looking forward to talking about Origins pretty soon. And then after that, we'll collaborate on First Class. Since I'm posting this review and my review of Origins back to back, you'll be seeing Origins very soon after this. Yes, so that's going to be a lot of fun. So guys, thank you so much as always for watching. Looking forward to doing more videos really soon. And if you want my thoughts on old or new films, of course, you know where to find me.